Hello and welcome to this revision guide for how to write a speech in an exam. Particularly we're talking here the GCSE exam for transactional writing that normally can be found on paper 2. Here's an example question then that you might face on the day. You can see they will clearly dictate they want you to write a speech. They'll give you a target audience, in this case Year 6 pupils, and they'll tell you a topic, in this case transferring to your school, telling them what to expect. This is a kind of standard question you might expect from the exam board. It taps into something the exam board know you know quite a bit about, and something that won't test you too much in terms of what you write. It's all about the skills here as normal, how persuasive you are, how interesting you are in your writing, how engaging you are for the target audience. Let's take a look then at the grades here and the mark scheme that you'd find. And indeed, if I was marking your work, this is what I'd have in front of me to grade your work. Round about the grade 5 or so is top of band 3, the grade 6 round about the band 4 there, and the grades 7, 8 and 9 is coming from that top band 5. You'll notice the word audience appears quite frequently, most notably in bullet point number 2 there. And you can see it wants awareness of audience. It wants you to be writing, adapting for purpose. It wants you to add detail to the work and add a bit of sophistication in terms of how you engage your audience and make them interested in the topic the exam board give you. On the right hand side, you've got your normal writing skills. You've got your sentence structures there, you've got your punctuation, your spelling, your tense, and your ambitious vocab. All of those have been covered in different revision videos, but really when it says range of sentences, it's looking for you to use all three: simple, compound, and complex. It's looking you to show off the vocab choices you can use, but equally within a range of what's suitable for the target audience as well. Having said that, if you aim too low, please don't use the most simple words you can use, even if it's an audience that are only 10 years old. Remember, this is an exam that you're completing that is going to be assessed at GCSE level. So watch that a little bit. Try and use the sophistication that you know you're capable of. Let's then take a look at this speech by Earl Spencer at Lady Diana's funeral from 1997 and think about how the speech is constructed and how it's effective for its audience.
I stand before you today, the representative of a family. I stand before you today, the representative of a family in grief, in a country in mourning, before a world in shock. We are all united, not only in our desire to pay our respects to Diana, but rather in our need to do so. For such was her extraordinary appeal, that the tens of millions of people taking part in this service all over the world, via television and radio, who never actually met her, feel that they too lost someone close to them in the early hours of Sunday morning. It is a more remarkable tribute to Diana than I can ever hope to offer her today. Diana was the very essence of compassion, of duty, of style, of beauty. All over the world, she was a symbol of selfless humanity, a standard bearer for the rights of the truly downtrodden, a very British girl who transcended nationality, someone with a natural nobility who was classless, and who proved in the last year that she needed no royal title to continue to generate her particular brand of magic. Today is our chance to say thank you for the way you brightened our lives, even though God granted you but half a life. We will all feel cheated, always, that you were taken from us so young, and yet we must learn to be grateful that you came along at all. Only now you are gone do we truly appreciate what we are now without, and we want you to know that life without you is very, very difficult. We have all despaired at our loss over the past week, and only the strength of the message you gave us through your years of giving has afforded us the strength to move forward. There is a temptation to rush to canonize your memory. There is no need to do so. You stand tall enough as a human being of unique qualities, not to need to be seen as a saint. Indeed, to sanctify your memory would be to miss out on the very core of your being. Your wonderfully mischievous sense of humor with a laugh that bent you double. Your joy for life transmitted wherever you took your smile and the sparkle in those unforgettable eyes. Your boundless energy which you could barely contain. But your greatest gift was your intuition, and it was a gift you used wisely. This is what underpinned all your other wonderful attributes. And if we look to analyze what it was about you that had such a wide appeal, we find it in your instinctive feel for what was really important in all our lives. Without your God-given sensitivity, we would be immersed in greater ignorance at the anguish of AIDS and HIV sufferers, the plight of the homeless, the isolation of lepers, the random destruction of landmines. Diana explained to me once that it was her innermost feelings of suffering that made it possible for her to connect with her constituency of the rejected. And here we come to another truth about her. For all the status, the glamour, the applause, Diana remained throughout a very insecure person at heart, almost childlike in her desire to do good for others, so she could release herself from deep feelings of unworthiness, of which her eating disorders were merely a symptom. The world sensed this part of her character and cherished her for her vulnerability, whilst admiring her for her honesty. The last time I saw Diana was July the 1st, her birthday in London, when typically she was not taking time to celebrate a special day with friends, but was guest of honour at a fundraising charity evening. She sparkled, of course, but I would rather cherish the days I spent with her in March when she came to visit me and my children in South Africa. I am proud of the fact that, apart from she was on public display meeting President Mandela, we managed to contrive to stop the ever-present paparazzi from getting a single picture of her. That meant a lot to her. These were days I will always treasure. It was as if we had been transported back to our childhood, when we spent such an enormous amount of time together, the two youngest in the family. Fundamentally, she hadn't changed at all, from the big sister who mothered me as a baby, fought with me at school, and endured those long train journeys between our parents' homes with me at weekends. It is a tribute to her level-headedness and strength that despite the most bizarre life imaginable after her childhood, she remained intact, true to herself. There is no doubt that she was looking for a new direction in her life at this time. She talked endlessly of getting away from England, mainly because of the treatment that she received at the hands of the newspapers. I don't think she ever understood why her genuinely good intentions were sneered at by the media, why there appeared to be a permanent quest on their behalf to bring her down. It is baffling. My own and only explanation is that genuine goodness is threatening to those at the opposite end of the moral spectrum. It is a point to remember that of all the ironies about Diana, perhaps the greatest was this. A girl given the name of the ancient goddess of hunting was, in the end, the most hunted person of the modern age. She would want us today to pledge ourselves to protecting her beloved boys, William and Harry, from a similar fate. And I do this here, Diana, on your behalf. We will not allow them to suffer the anguish that used regularly to drive you to tearful despair. And beyond that, on behalf of your mother and sisters, I pledge that we, your blood family, will do all we can to continue the imaginative and loving way in which you are steering these two exceptional young men, so that their souls are not simply immersed by duty and tradition, but can sing openly as you planned. We fully respect the heritage into which they have both been born, and will always respect and encourage them in their royal role. but we, like you, recognize the need for them to experience as many different aspects of life as possible, to arm them spiritually and emotionally for the years ahead. I know you would have expected nothing less from us. William and Harry, we all care desperately for you today. We're all chewed up with sadness at the loss of a woman who wasn't even our mother. How great your suffering is, we cannot even imagine. I would like to end by thanking God for the small mercies he's shown us at this dreadful time, for taking Diana at her most beautiful and radiant, and when she had joy in her private life. Above all, we give thanks for the life of a woman I'm so proud to be able to call my sister, the unique, the complex, the extraordinary and irreplaceable Diana, whose beauty, both internal and external, will never be extinguished from our minds.
A moving tribute from Charles Earl Spencer. A quarrel breaks out in Westminster Abbey. I've never heard that before, but it's
I think what stands out the most in that speech is the number of times that collective or personal pronouns are used. We, us, you, all desperately trying to connect with the audience. The structure is equally impressive. A series of anecdotes or mini stories about Diana and her life, deliberately to make us think about the subject matter and reflect on it and how it links to our own lives. You can now see on the screen a printout of how that speech would look if it was written down. You can see a short introduction, a series of paragraphs there that talk through Diana's traits and personality. We have some anecdotes there, the time Earl Spencer last saw Diana, and then we have the conclusion there summarising the thoughts of the speech and the message we want to pass on at the end of the speech. The hallmark of a good speech is capturing and holding the attention of those listening. There are various techniques and things you can try to do to achieve this. You can adopt the right tone for your audience. You can use rhetorical question, but don't overuse these because it comes tiring. You can use humour, where it is appropriate, of course. You can use repetition to make clear your overall meaning. You can come up with memorable phrases that stick in the reader's head. You can use anecdotes. Humans are nosy and so want to find out more about the topic you're talking about and how someone else has experienced it. And you can, perhaps most importantly, develop your ideas, especially in personal ways that strike a chord with the audience. And I think that's where Earl Spencer does particularly well. Let's take a look at this exam question then and think how I might plan an answer. Write a speech to your peers suggesting they should enjoy the local area. I should consider what experts I can use to guide my opinion. What could I describe to help make people go? What facts do you know that would be useful in your answer? What might people be worried about linking to the topic? What are the advantages of going to the countryside? So what are the advantages of the topic? And what would you need to take with you? What tools or skills would you need to help you being successful? Now on the screen now you can see one of those questions, what could I describe here to make people go, and the kind of answer you'd need to write in the exam. Look how detailed it is, look at the range of punctuation being used, and look how it uses personal pronouns to engage the audience. The countryside doesn't have to be as daunting and dangerous as you think. In Britain, we pride ourselves on being outdoor people, the kind of people who go out rather than stay in. You could do no better than taking a car far away from the grey streets you live in and go out into the emerald green environment of which we are rightfully proud. Imagine the lush green grass below and the crystal blue skies above. The look ahead at the views of England stretching as far as the eye can see. The bright sunshine is beckoning, so come and enjoy the sunshine in the garden of England. You can see I ask my audience to imagine the description. I ask them to picture that view in their heads, to make that view much more appetizing, much more engaging for them to connect with. That leads me then how to plan a speech. The opening should be a welcome or greeting that should be brief and simple. I then should outline my topic or my subject. I should then make 3 or 4 key points and develop each point into a paragraph. And then I need to pack a punch in my conclusion, making it as memorable as possible that links back to the introduction. End by acknowledging the audience in some way, normally by saying thank you for listening. As I write my speech, it's important that I use a series of connectives just to link my ideas together and structure it more appropriately for a GCSE answer. Some ways of going about this are highlighted on the board there in those thought bubbles. Another thing I need to bear in mind is, of course, the use of persuasive techniques, what we call a forest or da forest, depending on which clip or which website you go to revise. A stands for alliteration, F is your facts, O is opinions, R is repetition and rhetorical questions, E is exaggeration and emotive language, S is statistics or strong ending, and T is triple or rule of 3. All of these put together pack a hell of a punch on your audience. They persuade them to think about whatever the topic is you want them to think about and get their attention by keeping the writing engaging. Let's recap those in a bit more detail and watch this clip which explains what a forest is for and how some of those techniques can achieve effects.
So let's start with the basics. What is a forest? A forest is a cunning mnemonic to remember some of the key techniques. So A stands for alliteration, F stands for facts, O stands for opinions, R stands for rhetorical questions. So let's start with the basics. What is a forest? A forest is a cunning mnemonic to remember some of the key techniques. So A stands for alliteration, F stands for facts, O stands for opinions, R stands for rhetorical questions, and I've squeezed repetition in there as well. E stands for emotive language, S stands for statistics, and T stands for the rule of 3, which is a bit of a cheat really to make it more catchy, 3 brackets rule of, but you get the idea. Okay, so these, as I say, are your key techniques. They're not the be-all and end-all. There are others, such as similes, metaphors, others that you've studied, mostly kind of figurative language. But if you can remember these as a starting point, then you're onto a winner. Okay, moving on then, definitions. So it's all very well knowing the names of these words, but what do they mean? Okay, and what I'd like you to do whilst you're watching this is not just sit there watching it, but if you think about this, pick a topic and then you can pause after each example to try it for yourself. That's one of the best ways that you're going to be able to learn and revise these. So we start with alliteration. Alliteration, nice and simple. Alliteration just means repeating the same letter or sound at the beginning of a sentence. So the light gave a green for go, for example. You've got G, G, G. G for gave, G for green, G for go. Okay, so nice and simple. Facts then, again, simple enough, something known or proven to be true. So your example there, the Empire State Building is in New York. That is true, that is a fact. Okay, nobody could question it. Opinions are different altogether. An opinion is a view about something belonging to you or someone else. I've just noticed I made a typo there, see if you can spot it. My example there is teacher in your pocket is the best way to revise. So not necessarily true, it's just an opinion. You can't prove it, you can't back it up, but it belongs to either you or somebody else. Rhetorical questions, you should all know these. A question that is asked for effect, that is not supposed to be answered. Okay, so that's the key thing, isn't it? You're not expecting an answer. So there, do you know how to stay safe from pickpockets? Okay, you're asking the question to make the reader think about it. Statistics. Statistics are data using facts and figures. So the example there, I've made this up by the way, 95% of students going into exams unprepared are disappointed with their results. Okay, so you're backing it up there with a percentage. It could be a different type of statistic as well. Okay, on to rule of three then, finally. Rule of three is the idea that people remember things in threes. So ice cream is a cool, creamy, colourful treat. I've used three there, three words to describe it. Cool, creamy and colourful. Also some alliteration in there. But it's just the idea that they come in threes. Okay, so what's the effect and best use of these A-Forest techniques? I've grouped these for you. So we'll start with facts and statistics because they have pretty much a similar effect. So facts and statistics make your writing more believable, and you can make them up in the exam. You don't need to know any facts and statistics. You can just make them up as long as they sound reasonable. If the source that you're getting the information from as well sounds reliable, that's even better. So if it's from a university, for example, brilliant. Facts and statistics can also help your writing seem unbiased. So even if you're giving really biased facts and statistics, it seems like you're giving an unbiased view very convincingly. Okay, moving on to alliteration and the rule of three then. These techniques are really good for giving your writing what we call stickability. In other words, making them stick in the reader's head. So they create catchy, memorable phrases that stand out to the reader. And if you use them together, they give an even bigger impact. So three words perhaps that all start with the same letter for added impact. Okay, let's move on to opinions and emotive language then. These are two really powerful techniques, especially for persuading, to engage your reader either emotionally or with strong opinions, but often both. You could use both of these techniques to tell stories and anecdotes to prove the point you make. So just remember these if you're trying to sell something or you're trying to persuade something, especially emotive language and opinions are going to be really useful tools in your writing. Finally then, rhetorical questions. Now these are designed to make the reader think, and that means they're actively engaging with your writing. They're not just sitting there kind of nodding off or not really taking it in. If you're asking them a question, then it's prompting them to have a think about it, which means you're keeping them so it says actively engaged for longer. Put that clammy game controller down for a minute. Okay, finally then, let's put them all together into an example. So I've written one about skateboarding, so we'll just read it through and then see if we can spot all of the A-Forest techniques being used. So it says you, yes you. Put that clammy game controller down for a minute. Don't you worry, there's a world out there you're missing. Don't be a couch potato. Try skateboarding. There's a reason why it's been around for over 50 years. You can kickflip your way to friendships, fitness and the attention of adoring fans. People who say it's dangerous can shove it. Football, basketball and baseball also rank higher for most injuries sustained. So don't just feel the plastic controller in your hand. Feel the rumble of wheels on asphalt. Feel the wind rush through your hair. Feel alive. Okay, so the examples you'll get in the exam are obviously going to be long.
So remember here, you're looking for A-Forest: alliteration, facts, opinions, rhetorical questions, repetition, magic 3, statistics, etc. You'll notice it's absolutely filled with them. Nearly every sentence uses some technique or another, and you'll also notice the range of punctuation also being used here. I think the only criticism I might have is the exam board are unlikely to ask you to write about something this informal. So the spelling there of shove it, I don't think would work for necessarily a GCSE answer, but there still is overwhelmingly an effective piece of writing that uses A-Forest in its structure. Now that we've recapped all the A-Forest techniques, you now need to consider exactly how you piece these together into an answer. It's very likely that most speeches are persuasive, but obviously some of those techniques are a lot easier to use, but equally a lot more effective to use than others. Things like facts and opinions kind of comes second nature to most students. They don't really need to consider how they're going to use them. But the more advanced techniques like statistics, list of three or magic three, and anecdotes might need a bit of further thought. Use this screen as a revision screen. Do you remember what each of those techniques are? And equally, can you think how they might be used to have an effect on the reader? Let's take another look at an example then. This text is advertising a charity. Can you think what techniques it uses to get your attention? As you listen to the video, practice this by listing down the techniques A forest onto your sheets of paper. You should be able to tick off each one of A forest as this advert continues.
I'd like to tell you about a hero. He's a teenager whose life was turned upside down in a matter of seconds. He's been to hell and back in the last 6 years, but he's shown more courage and determination than most of us could ever imagine. I'm proud to introduce you to Ben.
When I look back, I think I took life for granted. I was like any normal young boy would be. I was active. I had my whole life ahead of me. I never really thought anything like that could happen to me.
When Ben was 12 years old, something happened that would change his life forever.
I was just watching TV and all of a sudden I felt sick. I ran up to the top of the stairs to try and reach the toilet. As soon as I got to the landing, I collapsed. I came round and my mum was there. She was asking me questions, are you okay?
He said, Mum, I can't feel my legs and I can't see.
I was just so scared and so confused. 1 minute I was running up the stairs, the next minute I was laying down on the floor blind. It was that quick and that sudden.
I just needed to get into hospital.
Ben had suffered from a rare viral illness that had attacked his spinal cord, leaving him blind and without the use of his legs. There was no guarantee he would recover.
Hearing those words was hard to come to terms with, but I was determined to fight it.
We just had to keep focused, we had to keep positive. He worked really, really hard.
6 months later, Ben's eyesight returned, and after 2 years of physio, Ben was learning to walk again.
He was quite mobile. He was almost there.
I was told that the chances of it happening to me again works out 1 in 64 million.
In 2009, aged 15, Ben was struck down by the illness once again.
Devastated. I just didn't know how we were going to get over it.
All the work that I put in had just been for nothing. I tried so hard and made sure that I could walk again. And then 2 years down the line, I was laying in a hospital bed, paralysed.
It was like climbing a mountain, coming back down and saying, now you've got to do it all again.
And this time, it was even worse. Ben lost the use of his legs and his arms.
I couldn't feed myself, dress myself. It's those little things you never think of, that you take for granted. I didn't want to see anyone, I didn't want to go out, I didn't want to do anything. I felt quite worthless.
He was at rock bottom. There was nothing at all. He was in so deep depression.
I didn't want to face it again. I was put on suicide watch.
It was the darkest, awfulest time. That was really hard.
Today, Ben has regained the use of his arms and his outlook is very different. His life changed when he was contacted by the Backup Trust, funded by Children in Need. Through training and activities, they aim to prove that although spinal injury can be devastating, it shouldn't stop anyone getting the most out of life.
It gave me hope. I was so shocked that I could do those things that I didn't even think were possible for disabled people to do.
Ben is driving, Ben has got into uni, Ben's got a lot of things to look forward to. Backup had not changed his life, they'd given him a life.
If it wasn't for them, I probably wouldn't be here today. So thank you.
Your money can do incredible things. So please call now on 03457 33 22 33. Thank you.
Now, obviously, the aim behind that advert was to persuade you to give money to the charity, and they do that through a very long anecdote which uses high-level vocab but equally repeated links to the audience, as well as a range of aforist techniques to make you think and feel and respond to Ben's story. Now, part of what made that successful is using your audience point of view, thinking about what they think or feel about the topic being discussed. Let's take this example then, taken from a speech about being kind to your peers. What the point of view of the audience might be is, I don't want to be kind as no one does anything for me. What you need to think then is how you'd counter that argument, how you'd overcome that audience member's response. Well, in red, I've included the sentences or phrases that tap into that line of thinking to kind of, let's say, counter the argument this member of the audience might have. It's really good to start with, I know what you're thinking. That way you're linking directly to your audience and tapping into what you would suggest they might be going through in their heads as they listen to your speech. I know what you're thinking. I've been there myself. Being kind doesn't always happen. It's sad but true. We don't all run around helping each other and making sure everyone has a happy, friendly day. For those of us who even think about helping someone when they need it, it's probably too late as we're too busy rushing to the next lesson or place to be. Unfortunately, we have to accept that we are born selfish. More often than not, our own needs come first. We are afraid that if we spend time on others, we might somehow miss out. However, to be honest, helping someone else doesn't have to be a chore or struggle. After all, it should be something we want to do. It can be as simple, easy and straightforward as asking how someone is doing at the beginning of the day. And for the sake of argument, isn't it likely that, if we are kind to others, they'll probably be kinder to us? Notice how powerful that argument is. It's honest, it's truthful, it links to what the audience might be thinking or feeling, but then overcomes it with a counter-argument as we explain perhaps, although you might be thinking quite negatively about a topic, it's much better and more kind to do the opposite. Now we've recapped all the basic skills of a really good speech, let's take a look at this really good example. What aphorist features does Barack Obama use? How does he link to his teenage or young audience?
As a nation, we've got plenty of reasons to hope. And I just want to end with one story just to give you a sense of what we're talking about here. Roger Brown came here today from Harlem. Where's Roger? Roger Brown came here today from Harlem. Where's Roger? There he is, right. I used to have a haircut like that, but and maybe after I'm done with the presidency, I'm going back to that. Growing up, I want you to listen to Roger's story. Because it's unique and it's special, but it's also representative. So growing up, Roger spent some time in the foster care system. Before going to live with his mom, who was working two jobs to make ends meet. When Roger was in 6th grade, his mom entered his name in the Promise Academy Charter School lottery and prayed. And Roger won a spot. Now, the way I hear it, Roger, you were still having some problems sometimes. He was the class clown and acting out and almost got himself expelled. But the teachers and the staff did not give up on him. They saw something in him. They kept pushing him. And then one summer, when Roger was home visiting his foster family, he looked around the room and he realized nobody in that room had gone to college. And nobody in that room had a job. And at that moment, something clicked, and Roger decided he wanted something better for himself, and for his mom, and for his two sisters who looked up to him. So Roger buckled down. He went from failing his classes to passing his classes. He became a member of the first graduating class at the Promise Academy. And today Roger is a sophomore. Today Roger is a sophomore at Hunter College in New York, one of the best colleges in the country, the first person in his family to get that far. And now he wants to go to medical school and become a neurologist. So If you want to know why I care about this stuff so much, it's because I'm not that different from Roger. There was a period of time in my life where I was goofing off. I was raised by a single mom. I didn't know my dad. The only difference between me and Roger was my environment was more forgiving than his. That's the only difference. If I screwed up, the consequences weren't quite as great. So if Roger can make it, and if I can make it, if Kiara can make it, every kid in this country can make it. But we've got to believe in that. We can't just give lip service to it. And it can't just get caught up in a bunch of political arguments. There are legitimate questions about how the best way to do this is, how we can best make progress. And there are legitimate debates to be had about how big of a role is government in that process, how big of a role is the private sector, and there's no disagreement that there has to be individual initiative. It's got to start inside. Roger had to have a change of attitude. I had to have a change of attitude. Kiara, she probably didn't need a change of attitude. She was focused the whole time. We don't dispute that, but we do know that sometimes we talk about this stuff as if we care, and then we don't deliver. We don't follow through. We don't make the effort. It's not sustained. We lose interest. And then we say to ourselves, well, maybe nothing can be done. And we put up with it. And as a consequence, a lot of our kids get lost. And we can't allow that to happen. That's what the promise zones represent.
Look how cleverly Barak attacks his audience there. Makes them think about their own views, their own thoughts, and then gets them to realise perhaps those thoughts are wrong and what they can do to change. That's what a really good speech does. It forces you to think. As we now begin to look at some of the more advanced measures you could use and think about the different sections of your speech, consider one of these example practice questions. Choose one to begin writing your own response. Think about how you might use the following skills then when constructing your full answer. First of all, we're going to cover using an audience to create an introduction. This introduction then could be linked to writing a speech to your peers, suggesting how they could be healthier. The key word there is peers, people your own age. Notice it starts off with then thank you for coming, a clearly distinctive speech-like introduction. It follows that up with a pretty ornate, complex sentence using a range of commas for subordination and then a semicolon to split in half the two key ideas. You notice it uses repetition by repeating a statistic and exaggerates that by saying yes, 60%. That sentence's section finishes with a rhetorical question. Are they right? Getting us to think about the statistic given. It then goes on at the end to highlight what the next section of the speech is going to be. Well, I'm here to put the record straight and persuade you all to eat healthier in this case. So that is then a 3-sentence introduction that's short, precise, but uses a range of the skills you need to use in your assessment. Let's take a look at another example. Write a speech to persuade grandmas to give more money to their grandchildren. This style of question wouldn't ever really come up in the test, but it's quite a fun one to look at an example of. Poor grandma there. We need to persuade her to part with her pension money. How might we go about doing that? First of all, then, I'm polite. I'm formal. I want to be friendly to them. I know that most old ladies are quite busy or busy thinking about their friends or relatives. so I'm just going to take the time to thank them for actually listening to me. It enters into the actual topic and makes it clear why that topic might be important to them. The second paragraph covers some slightly more negatives, gets them thinking about although they might love their grandchildren, they also might need their support as well. Notice the mixture of sentence structures there, some complex sentences as well as short, sharp ones to be effective and perhaps memorable. This would then give you paragraph 1 and 2. Paragraph 1, polite, friendly, connecting with the audience. Paragraph 2, actually getting to think about the topic being given and beginning to use facts and statistics to prove my point. Here's another example taken again from the healthy eating speech. And in this case, you might begin to look at the range of techniques being used. A forest is being used here, but not particularly effectively. It's very much a ticking the boxes style answer. The A forest techniques have just been shunted in there without really thinking how they could be built on for effect. This would be a very basic, maybe grade 3 or grade 4 then, introduction. It's not overly polite, it does use the techniques, but doesn't really think about the impact on the audience. Let's move on to talk about how to build from quotes. Now, linking to the idea of fitness once again, I need to think of what my audience might be thinking or feeling about the topic. An example quote might be, I can't stand running, I just can't be bothered, as a reason why somebody would not want to go out and get fit. Once again, I've used the opening sentence, I know what you're thinking, I've been there myself. That response, that opening sentence, could be used for pretty much any question that you might be asked. I then need to think what my audience might think about running and why they feel the way they do. Running and fitness isn't as fun as you see on the adverts or in films. We don't run with happy smiles on our faces and a spring in our step. For those of us who even think about going for a run, we probably don't actually bother as we look outside and see it's pouring down before rolling back over in bed, snuggling into a duvet that's far more cosy than a pair of grey running bottoms. Notice how I'm painting a picture of the scene for my audience. I'm hopefully getting them to smile as I connect with them and beginning to also use a range of vocab there for effect. The words snuggling and duvet have been particularly chosen because they're interesting words to use, quite rare in the average piece of writing. Now I'm going to build my argument based on that quote, linking to what I want my audience to actually think. However, to be honest, fitness doesn't mean donning a smelly pair of trainers and heading into the morning mist. Notice the alliteration, morning mist. It can mean walking instead of taking the bus or playing with a smaller brother or sister. It can be simple, easy and straightforward as that. There's another sentence that you can nick for any given answer. It can be simple, easy and straightforward as that. That could link to any topic really. And for the good of our health, perhaps we should think about changing our ways despite something as silly as the rain outside. Notice once again a collective pronoun we being used repeatedly there to make it sound like the speaker of the speech is feeling the same way as the audience who are listening. Now, to create this response, I think you need to consider then, first off, what is the quote you're using? Think of a quote that might be said by your audience and emphasize that you know how that audience member feels and why. You can see there it needs to be about 4 or 5 lines of your response to really tackle that in some detail. An opening sentence, I know what you're thinking. The second section, highlighted in beige or peach there, explains why teenagers don't do what you're asked by using effective words. In short, why do those people feel that way is what's covered in section 2. Section 3 or part 3 explains an alternative. What might be the positives of the topic? How might the audience feel if they were to follow the advice that you're giving? And lastly, part 4, force them to make a choice. Explain some of the benefits if they do follow the advice you're giving. What positives could you offer them to convince them to do as you ask? Now let's do the same thing and focus on building from facts. Very similar to building on a quote, of course, but in this case, building from a number or statistic. Let's take a fairly easy stat there. 1 in 6 people in the UK are going to be obese by 2017. I start by saying that's a worrying statistic. That shouldn't be something I'm happy stating. You'll notice after that it goes through a lot of detail where that statistic might come from, the person to back up that statistic, an example that links to the statistic I'm given. In other words, if I'm saying 1 in 6, I'm going to name one person who links to that statistic. I then back that up by a celebrity endorsement. I check I've used 10 kinds of punctuation. As you know, we are graded for punctuation in a writing test. And then I emphasise and describe the benefits. So I want to describe this situation using some effective or interesting words. If I throw in some alliteration similes there, so much the better. So as you can see, I've got a checklist of how to write it there, numbered 1 to 7 on the side of the screen. And if you're unsure what an A grade sentence is, or grade 8 sentence is, there's an example in the purple box to the right. It's a really ornate sentence with lots of subordinate clauses, including at the beginning, middle and end of the sentence, and then adds a semicolon at the end before asking a rhetorical question. Take a look at that sentence and try and build your own based on a simple sentence of your choice. There is a separate video to guide you through how to do this. Lastly, let's talk about how to write a conclusion. Here is an example conclusion that sums up all my ideas, in this case about healthy eating. I've made it short, sharp and punchy with sentences like "You've the power to do this." And then I end with more or less a Michael Jackson quote. Go on, you've got to make a change, you could make a difference, you could make it right. A magic 3 there that I've simply pinched from elsewhere because it's quite a memorable chain of suggestions I'm giving to my audience to make a difference to their own lives. I've included a grade criteria down the side there, grade 4, grade 5, 6 and 7, which kind of summarises how all these skills linked together might suggest the grade you're going to get. If you look at your whole answer so far, which one of those grade criteria might best fit the response that you've given? Let's take another higher level look at an example. I've included my introduction here to a speech on kindness, but I've also included my conclusion. You'll notice that they link together. You'll notice they repeat some of the same words or phrases. You'll notice that the conclusion refers directly to the introduction with "I started my speech by saying that." If anything, the conclusion is a little bit long, but you get the idea that it's fully linked to the beginning, so everything wraps up very nicely by the time I reach the end of my speech. Thank you very much for listening then. I leave you with the marking criteria on the screen to double check the example or the mock practices you've done and check that against the criteria you'll be assessed on. Thank you very much for listening.